Let's take a little twirl around the rink with a morning skate edition of the Inside Edge. Here are your hosts, Bob McElligott and Jody Shelley.
At the American Airlines Center here in Dallas, Blue Jackets getting set to wrap up their three-game road trip tonight with a game against the Stars. It'll be the second time in 6 days that these two teams go head-to-head. I'm Bob McElligott along with Jody Shelley. Jeff Rimmer sitting in with us this morning as well. And, well, Jody, 1-1 on this road trip. Blue Jackets really want to pick up these points tonight with Detroit sitting and waiting back at home to play against the Blue Jackets tomorrow night. These points would be huge this evening.
Well, here's what, Bob. You look at how they started the road trip in Chicago, really laid an egg in regards of the second and third period and the outcome of the game, losing by 5 goals. But here they came into Nashville, went into Nashville, and won a 1-0 game, which to me, I mean, to win, I think they've won 1-0 another time this year. It was against Tampa, and I think it was after a big beating, too. I can't recall who they lost to, but it was a good reaction. It was a game, and it showed that this team can lock it down. And they really had to do that against Nashville, who threw a lot of shots towards the net. The guys looked like they battled. I was at ice level, and I was so impressed with the way the defense and the forwards battled together in the defensive zone and how Sergei Bobrovsky worked so hard all night. So with that being said, yes, that tone, that tempo, that attitude that they had, the matter-of-fact game they played, they really need to make sure they bring it here tonight because they, as we know, they caught Dallas. Both teams had played the night before, but they caught Dallas with the travel and really jumped on them in the first and held on for the win at home. So got to be sharp and prepared tonight to have another gutsy effort here in Dallas.
As the Zamboni goes round and round on the ice behind us before the Blue Jackets get on the ice. Jeff, last time these two teams played, Artem Anisimov had 2 goals. He had the only goal against Nashville the other night, and this morning was named as the number 2 star of the week in the NHL. This guy is really starting to peak at the right time, isn't he?
Boy, is he ever. You know, talking to Artem here prior to the Jackets starting after the Olympic break, I think he was really impressed. Obviously not with Russian's performance in the Olympic, but just being around Datsuk and the rest of that Russian crew and learned how they prepare, learned how dedicated they are. And he's come back here as a force. He's now scored the game-winning goal in each of the last 4 Blue Jacket wins. Rightfully, he's been named one of the stars of the week. Nice to see him get recognition. He's now set a career high in goals. And they're going to need Artem and the rest of the crew here today with a big effort here. Dallas is playing back-to-back, not unlike the Blue Jackets. They want to get points at home. They've won 2 in a row and coincidentally 2 home starts since losing to the Blue Jackets. And I'll tell you what, if not for Columbus's big first period last Tuesday night at Nationwide, why Dallas would have come from behind for a victory.
As a matter of fact, Lindy Ruff already said this morning when he was asked what do you have to do or what did you learn after playing the Blue Jackets 6 days ago, he said, we can't start so slowly, and that was very obvious in that game. You know Lindy Ruff very well. You've known him for a long, long time. You know, he was in Buffalo for what seemed to be forever. He's come here, and he's made an immediate impact on this franchise, hasn't he?
Well, Lindy's a great coach. In fact, if you read the Buffalo newspapers and columnists here over the last, since the day he was fired, they fired the wrong guy. Lindy's an outstanding coach. Witness, he was part and a key part of Canada's Olympic gold medal victory, an assistant to Mike Babcock. Great coach, not only from the standpoint of the X's and O's, but he knows how to treat players. He was a player himself, and at times he can certainly put the hammer down, but at other times he can lighten up the room. And you know what? That's a good thing. That's a refreshing thing. And that's something you don't see from a lot of coaches. Probably Jody could answer better as a player and a guy in the dressing room, but sometimes you need a little levity, and Lindy Ruff is that kind of coach.
How important is it to have a coach that understands all those aspects?
Well, it is, because you go through a lot during the season. There's a lot of different instances. There's situations that come up. There's rough nights. There's good patches. And you know, he's a guy that can be a tough person. He can be tough on his players. But at the same time, as Jeff mentioned, you have to have that balance. We would phrase it as he gets it, and he gets it as a player, which is it's refreshing because in that itself, you end up putting a lot more trust in him when he says, no, we're going to practice hard today, or no, we're not doing an optional skate, or those little details, because you realize you will get rewarded later on because he gets it.
I was just going to say he used the term rough. Of course, that's Lindy's name, and as we said on the telecast, and of course it's been said many, many times over the years, Lindy was a guy that was physical. I wouldn't say he was a Jody Shelley type player, but he dropped the mitts and go. But he had a reputation for being rough at home and just simply Lindy on the road.
Well, the Blue Jackets.
I thought it was Lindy at home, rough on the road.
No. Maybe away from the rink that was the case, but in the arena it was the other way around.
All right, let's talk about what the Blue Jackets have to do tonight. Jody, the Nashville Predators, as well as they played the other night, one thing that has been hampering them is they have no offense. They just haven't been scoring. The Blue Jackets not going to face a team in that same predicament here tonight when you have the likes of Tyler Seguin, who, by the way, is the number one star of the week in the NHL this week. You've got Jamie Benn. You've got a lot of guys on this team that have ways of finding the back of the net. If the Blue Jackets play that same type of defense, can they keep those guys off the board?
Well, yes, but they have to expect to they need to score more themselves. The Blue Jackets, they scored 1 goal in each of the last 2 games, so there's some thought has to go into that. They definitely have had some power play opportunities, but also in saying that they've got to limit their penalties. They took too many penalties last game too, I thought. So you're in a situation here where you're on the first of a back-to-back here. Detroit is going to be at home watching this game in Columbus while the Jackets are playing tonight, getting ready for tomorrow. But the Jackets have a tall task at hand, and you don't want to have your penalty killers out there all night, and you want to make sure that you get out and create opportunities yourself. But defense has got to be a key, and I think you'll see that with Curtis McElligott in net tonight. You'll see the guys playing a little more defensive-minded, not just letting him hang out to dry.
Corey Tropp and Blake Como going into the lineup the other night obviously infused some energy, and that paid off pretty well for Todd Richards making that decision. One guy I want to ask you about, and I kind of feel bad about asking about this guy because he does such good work and he works so hard, but it's Brandon Dubinsky. But here's the part I want to ask you about. Right now, the scoring hasn't been there for him. He's doing all the other things. The scoring hasn't been there. And when you talk about this team needing scoring, I think you look his direction and you look the direction of Nathan Horton.
Yeah, no question. And I'm glad you added Horton to that and these are guys that, they are pressing. They expect big things from themselves every day. They know that they're kind of the leaders of the group and being an older players in this young team. There's value in that. So, these guys are working. They're trying to score. It's on their mind, that's for sure. But a night like tonight or this patch here right now with Detroit too, these guys, it would be good to see them get one in and get something going here, especially in this late season push that the Blue Jackets are in. The other night they didn't need it, but like you mentioned earlier, I think tonight they're going to need it.
Jeff, it'll be interesting to see if Todd does change anything tonight because he's coming off the win. But here's the thing. He's got options now with a healthy group and a lot of forwards. And speaking of a healthy group, Jared Boll's going to join that pretty soon. He was the first guy out on the ice today. He's skating, so those decisions will become even tougher as we go along.
Judging by what he said yesterday after the optional skate, and it was really just the players that didn't play in Nashville that skated, he's going to stick with the same forward lines. Nikitin likely will play on the blue line. And, of course, there is a change in goal. Curtis McElligott will start, and the Jackets need a big effort from Curtis. He's 4-2 against the West this year. This will be his first start in 12 games. Bob went 11 in a row. So they need Curtis to have a big game here. And, of course, at the opposite end, the goaltender is a guy that we're quite familiar with, the former Boston Bruin and now Florida Panther, and he missed out on his own bobblehead night there in Florida. Interesting to see how he performs tonight. I'll tell you what, this is a big game for the Jackets. They've got Detroit sitting in Columbus. They're practicing in our building today. Mike Babcock, very disappointed with his club's effort, called it the worst of the season yesterday in an afternoon nationally televised game in New York against the Rangers.
And you were talking about Tim Thomas, who will start with Kari Lehtinen out of the lineup. One thing about Tim Thomas, Jody, this guy's got trophies. He's got Stanley Cup rings, so he doesn't care what he looks like, apparently. He's not into fashion because he's got the old-time mask, and he still had out here this morning the Florida Panthers pads. And let me tell you, that red and yellow and blue just really doesn't match this victory green of the Dallas Stars, but he doesn't care.
No, I think he's got his own fashion, and he makes very interesting statements. To go back to what Jeff said about the lineup, it's interesting that Todd Richards made those decisions the other night, and one guy that he put in Nikitin's spot, Golubev, I thought had a very strong game. I didn't realize he had such bite in his game. He played kind of a physical, in-your-face bit of a style against the Predators. Didn't back down from any confrontations, and I like to see that out of those young guys who get these opportunities. I think Todd is in a great situation as a coach. He's got hard decisions, and that's a big part of his job. And tonight, with Nikitin going back in, that might not seem like a hard decision, but when you have a young kid like Golubev that's working as hard, and get in there. And it's great to see Trop and Como in. Now you got two more guys working hard in Fratton and Atkinson, who are now. It's time they know where they're at. They've got to work that extra hard. They've got to pay attention to details and fight to get back in the lineup.
Just a further word on Tim Thomas. It takes a great goaltender to analyze a goaltender. And one of the great goaltenders, no longer a player in the National Hockey League, but proud to say he's president of the hockey club, John Davidson. John talking about Tim Thomas here while the skate was going on said, you beat Tim Thomas, and Jody, you're down there at ice level, so don't be afraid to lean over onto the Blue Jacket side. Let the players know. JD says you can beat Tim Thomas backdoor, so look for some backdoor plays tonight.
All right, we will look for that here at the American Airlines Center. Oh, what? You got something?
So hopefully JD does the goalie scouting report tonight.
On that note, that'll wrap up the morning skate edition of the Inside Edge. Tonight's game getting underway at 8 o'clock from Dallas. Jody and Jeff will be on Fox Sports Ohio. I'll be on the Blue Jackets radio network. So thanks for listening.
You've been listening to the morning skate edition of the Inside Edge. Come back every game day to get the breakdown from Bob McElligott and Jody Shelley.